Mysteries await just a page away. Ready to dive in? Welcome to The Book Reader, where stories unfold one enchanting page at a time. Subscribe now and unlock the magic.
Of The Girl Who Played with Fire by Stieg Larsson.
Part 4. Terminator Mode. Chapter 29. Wednesday, April 6th to Thursday, April 7th. Salander was shaking with rage. That morning she had gone to Björn's summer cabin in peace and quiet. She hadn't opened her computer since the night before, and during the day she had been too busy to listen to the news. She was half expecting the incident in Stallerholmen to get a mention, but she was completely unprepared for the storm that she now encountered on the TV news. Miriam Wu was in Söder Hospital, attacked and badly wounded by a gigantic assailant who had kidnapped her outside the apartment building on Lundagatan. Her condition was described as serious. She'd been rescued by the former professional boxer Paolo Roberto. How he had come to be in a warehouse in Nykvarn was not explained. He was mobbed by reporters when he came out of the hospital, but he didn't want to make any comments. His face looked as if he had gone 10 rounds with his hands tied behind his back. 2 bodies had been found buried in the woods close to where Miriam Wu had been assaulted. It was reported that the police had designated a third site to be excavated as well, and that this might not be the last of it. And then there was the search for the fugitive Lisbeth Salander. The net, so they said, was tightening. That day the police had surrounded the neighborhood of Stallerholmen. She was armed and dangerous. She had shot and wounded a Hells Angels biker, possibly 2. The shootout had taken place at the summer cabin of the murdered lawyer Nils Björn. By evening the police were ready to concede that she might have managed to elude the cordon. Ekström had called a press conference. His responses were evasive. No, he could not say whether Salander had dealings with the Hells Angels. No, he could not confirm the rumor that Salander had been seen at the warehouse in Nykvarn. No, there was nothing to indicate that this was an underworld gang war. No, it could not be confirmed that Salander alone was responsible for the Enskede murders. They were now searching for her solely to question her about the circumstances of the murders. Salander frowned. Something had shifted within the police investigation. She went online and first read the newspaper's reports, then accessed the hard drives of Ekström, Armansky, and Blomkvist, one by one. Ekström's email contained several messages of interest, in particular a memo sent by Jan Bublansky at 5:22 p.m. The email was brisk and devastatingly critical of Ekström's management of the preliminary investigation. It ended with what was effectively an ultimatum. He demanded, a. that Inspector Modig be reinstated, effective immediately. b. that the focus of the investigation be redirected so as to explore alternative solutions to the Enskede murders. And c. that research be started without delay on the figure known only as Zala. The accusations against Salander are based on a single direct piece of evidence, her fingerprints on the murder weapon. Which, I remind you, is proof that she handled the weapon but no proof that she fired it, and even less that she fired it at the murder victims. We now know there are other players involved. The Södertälje police have found, so far, 2 bodies in shallow graves close to a warehouse owned by a cousin of Carl Magnus Lundin. It should be obvious that Salander, however violent and whatever her psychological profile, had nothing to do with those deaths. Bublansky finished by saying that if his demands were not met he would leave the investigative team, which he did not intend to do quietly. Ekström had replied that Bublansky should do what he thought was best. Salander obtained even more surprising information from Armansky's hard drive. A brief exchange of emails with Milton's payroll office established that Nicholas Hedström had left the company, effective immediately. He would get vacation pay and 3 months severance. An email to the manager on duty stated that if Hedström came back to the building he could be escorted to his desk to remove personal effects and then escorted from the premises. An email to the technical department advised them that Hedström's card key was to be devalidated. But most interesting was an exchange between Armansky and Milton Securities lawyer, Frank Elenius. Armansky asked how Salander could best be represented in the event that she was taken into custody. Elenius replied that there was no reason for Milton to become concerned with a former employee who had committed murder. It would not reflect well upon Milton's security were the company to be so involved. Armansky replied brusquely that Salander's involvement in any murder was still an open question, and that his concern was to provide support for a former employee whom he considered innocent. Blomkvist had not, Salander discovered, been on his computer since early the previous day. So no news. Bowman laid the folder on the table in Armansky's office. He sat down heavily. Frackland opened it and began to read. Armansky stood by the window looking out at Gamla stan. "This is the last report I can deliver. I've been kicked off the investigation," Bowman said. "Not your fault," Frackland said. "No, not your fault," Armansky said and sat down. He had collected all the material that Bowman had provided over the course of 2 weeks in a pile on the conference table. "I talked to Bublansky. You've done a good job, Sonny. He is sorry to lose you, but he had no choice because of Hedstrom. That's okay. I discovered that I get along much better here at Milton than down at Kingsholmen. Can you give us a summary?" "Well, if the objective was to find Lisbeth Salander, then obviously we failed. It was a very messy investigation with a number of competing personalities, and Bublansky may not have had ultimate control over the search. Hans Fast. Fast is a real fuck-up. But the problem is not just Fast and a sloppy investigation. Bublansky saw to it that all the leads were followed as far as they could be. The fact is, Salander has been damn good at covering her tracks." "But your job wasn't only to pin down Salander," Armansky said. "No, and I'm thankful that we didn't tell Hedstrom about my other assignment to act as your mole and see to it that Salander wasn't falsely accused." "And what do you think today?" "When we started I was positive that she was guilty. Today I'm not sure one way or the other. So many things don't fit." "Yes? Well, I would no longer consider her the prime suspect. I'm leaning more and more towards thinking there's something to Mikael Blomkvist's reasoning. Which means that we have to identify and find the killers. Shall we take the investigation from the beginning?" Armansky said, pouring coffee. Salander had one of the worst evenings of her life. She was thinking about when she had thrown the firebomb into Zalachenko's car. In that instant the nightmares stopped and she had felt a great inner peace. She had had other problems, but they had always been about her, and she could handle them. Now it was about Mimi. Mimi had been beaten up and was in the hospital. She was innocent. She'd had nothing to do with any of this. Her only crime was that she knew Salander. She cursed herself. She was riddled with feelings of guilt. The blame was all hers. Her address was secret. She was safe. And then she had persuaded Mimi to live in her apartment, at the address that anyone could find. How could she have been so thoughtless? She might as well have beaten her up herself. She felt so wretched that tears came to her eyes. But Salander never cried. She wiped them away. At 10:30 she was so restless that she could not stay in the apartment. She put on her coat and boots and set off into the night. She walked down side streets until she reached Ringvägen and stood at the end of the driveway to Söder Hospital. She wanted to go to Mimi's room and wake her up and tell her that everything was going to be all right. Then she saw blue lights from a police car near Zinken and stepped into an alleyway to avoid being seen. She was home again just after midnight. She was freezing, so she undressed and crawled into bed. She could not sleep. At 1:00 a.m. she was up again, walking naked through the unlit apartment. She went into the guest bedroom, where there was a bed and a desk. She had never set foot in it before. She sat on the floor with her back to the wall and stared into the night. Lisbeth Salander has a guest bedroom. What a joke. She sat there until after 2:00, and by then she was so cold that she was shivering. Then she started to cry again. Some time before dawn, Salander took a shower and dressed. She put on the coffee maker and made breakfast and turned on her computer. She went into Blomkvist's hard drive. She was surprised to discover that he had not updated his research journal, and instead she opened the folder less than Lisbeth Salander greater than. There was a new document titled, Lisbeth Important. She looked at the document properties. It had been created at 12:52 a.m. She double-clicked. Lisbeth, contact me right away. This story is worse than I could have dreamed. I know who Zalachenko is and I think I know what happened. I've talked to Holger Palmgren. I understand Teleborian's role and why they locked you up at the clinic. I think I know who murdered Dag and Mia. I also think I know why, but I'm missing some crucial pieces of information. I don't understand Björman's role. Call me. Contact me at once. We can solve this. Mikael. Salander read the document slowly again. Kalle Blomkvist had been busy. Practical pig. Practical fucking pig. He still thought there was something to solve. He meant well. He wanted to help. He didn't understand that whatever happened, her life was over. It had ended before she even turned 13. There was only one solution. She created a new document and tried to write a reply, but the thoughts were whirling around in her head and there were so many things she wanted to say to him. Salander in love. What a fucking joke. He would never find out. She would never give him the satisfaction. She deleted the document and stared at the empty screen. But no answer at all was less than he deserved. He had stood faithfully in her corner like a steadfast tin soldier. She created a new document and wrote, "Thanks for being my friend." First, she had a number of logistical decisions to take. She needed a means of transport. Using the burgundy Honda, still on Lundagaten, was tempting but out of the question. There was nothing in Prosecutor Ekstrom's laptop to indicate that anyone in the police investigation had discovered that she had bought a car, which might be because she had not yet managed to send in the registration documents and insurance papers. But Mimi might have talked about the car when she was questioned by the police, and obviously Lundagaten was under sporadic surveillance. The police knew that she had a motorcycle, and it would be even more obtrusive to take it out of storage from the apartment building on Lundagaten. Besides, after a number of summer-like days, a change in the weather was forecast, and she had no great desire to venture out on a bike on rain-slick highways. One alternative, of course, would be to rent a car in Irene Nesser's name, but there were risks involved with that too. Someone might recognize her, and the fake identity would then be lost to her. That would be a catastrophe. It was her escape route out of the country. Then she gave a lopsided smile. There was one other possibility. She booted up her computer, logged on to Milton Security's network and navigated to the carpool, which was administered by a secretary in Milton's reception area. Milton Security had close to 40 cars at its disposal, some of which carried the company logo and were used on business trips. The majority were unmarked surveillance cars, and these were kept in the garage at Milton's HQ near Slussen, practically around the corner. She studied the personnel files and chose employee Marcus Collender, who had just gone on vacation for 2 weeks. He had left the telephone number of a hotel in the Canary Islands. She changed the hotel name and scrambled the digits of the phone number where he could be reached. Then she entered a note that Collender's last action while on duty had been to drop off one of the cars for servicing. She picked a Toyota Corolla automatic, which she had driven before, and recorded that it would be back a week later. Finally, she went into the surveillance system and reprogrammed the cameras she would have to walk past. Between 4:30 and 5 o'clock a.m. They would show a repeat of the previous half hour, but with an altered time code. At 4:15 she packed her backpack. She had 2 changes of clothes, 2 mace canisters, and the fully charged taser. She looked at the 2 guns she had acquired. She rejected Sandstrom's Colt 1911 government and chose Niemanen's Polish P83 Winod, which had 1 round missing from the magazine. It was slimmer and fit her hand better. She put it into her jacket pocket. Salander closed the lid of her PowerBook but left the computer on the desk. She had transferred the contents of her hard drive to an encrypted backup on the net and then erased her whole hard drive with a program she had written herself, which guaranteed that not even she could reconstruct the contents. She did not want to rely on her PowerBook, which would just be cumbersome to drag around. Instead, she took her Palm Tungsten PDA with her. She looked around her office. She had a feeling that she would not be coming back to the apartment in Mosbach and knew that she was leaving secrets behind that she should probably destroy. But glancing at her watch, she realized that she did not have much time. She turned off the desk lamp. She walked to Milton Security, went into the garage, and took the elevator up to the administrative offices. She met no one in the empty corridors, and taking the car keys out of the unlocked cabinet in reception presented no difficulty. She was in the garage 30 seconds later, and blipped open the door lock on the Corolla. She dumped her backpack in the passenger seat and adjusted the driver's seat and the rearview mirror. She used her old card key to open the garage door. Just before 5 o'clock she turned up from Söder Mallerstrand at Vasterbrunn. It was starting to get light. Blomkvist woke up at 6:30. He had not set his alarm clock and had slept for only 3 hours. He got up and switched on his iBook and opened the folder less than Lisbeth Salander grayer than to look for her reply. "Thanks for being my friend." Blomkvist felt a chill run down his spine. Hardly the answer he had hoped for. It felt like a farewell letter. Salander alone against the world. He went to the kitchen and started the coffee maker and then had a shower. He put on a pair of worn jeans and realized that he had not had time to do laundry for weeks. He had no clean shirts. He put on a wine-red sweatshirt under his gray jacket. As he made breakfast in the kitchen, a glint of metal on the counter behind the microwave caught his eye. With a fork he fished out a key ring. Salander's keys. He had found them after the attack on Lundagaten and put them on top of the microwave with her shoulder bag. He had forgotten to give them to Inspector Modig with the bag, and they must have fallen down in back. He stared at the bunch of keys. 3 large ones and 3 small. The 3 large keys were presumably to an entrance door, an apartment, and a deadbolt. Her apartment, obviously not the apartment on Lundagaten. So where the hell did she live? He examined the 3 small keys more closely. One was probably for her Kawasaki. One looked like it was for a safety deposit box or storage cabinet. He held up the 3rd key. The number 24,914 was stamped on it. The realization hit him. A P.O. box. Lisbeth Salander has a P.O. box. He looked up the post offices in Södermalm in the phone book. She had lived on Lundagaten. Ringvägen was too far away. Maybe Hornsgaten. Or Rosenlandsgaten. He turned off the coffee maker, abandoned his breakfast, and drove Berger's BMW to Rosenlandsgaten. The key did not fit. He drove on to Hornsgaten. The key fit perfectly in box 24,914. He opened it and found 22 items of post, which he stuffed into the outside pocket of his laptop case. He drove on to Hornsgaten, parked by the Kvarter Cinema, and had breakfast at Copacabana on Bergsundstrand. As he waited for his café latte, he examined the letters one by one. All were addressed to Wasp Enterprises. 9 letters had been sent from Switzerland, 8 from the Cayman Islands, 1 from the Channel Islands, and 4 from Gibraltar. With no pang of conscience, he slit open the envelopes. The first 21 contained bank statements and reports on various accounts and funds. Salander was as rich as a troll. The 22nd letter was thicker. The address was handwritten. The envelope had a printed logo and the return address of Buchanan House, Queensway Quay, Gibraltar. The enclosed letter was on the stationery of a Jeremy S. Macmillan, solicitor. He had neat handwriting. Dear Ms. Salander, this is to confirm that the final payment on your property was concluded as of January 20th. As agreed, I am enclosing copies of all documentation, but I will keep the original set. I trust this will meet with your satisfaction. Let me add that I hope everything is well with you. I very much enjoyed your surprise visit of last summer, and must tell you that I found your company refreshing. I look forward to being of further service as necessary. Yours sincerely, JSM. The letter was dated January 24th. Salander apparently did not pick up her mail very often. Blomkvist looked at the attached documentation for the purchase of an apartment in a building at Fiskergatan 9 in Mosebach. Then he almost choked on his coffee. The price paid was 25 million kroner, and the deal was concluded with 2 payments a year apart. Salander watched a solid, dark-haired man unlock the side door of Auto Expert in Eskilstuna. It was a garage, a repair shop, and a car rental agency. A typical franchise. It was 6:50, and according to a handwritten sign on the front door, the shop did not open until 7:30. She went across the street and followed the man through the side door into the shop. The man heard her and turned round. "Refik Alba?" she said. "Yes. Who are you?" "I'm not open yet." She raised Niemanen's P83 Wenad and held the weapon with 2 hands aimed at his face. "I don't want to haggle with you. I just want to see your list of cars rented out. I want to see it now. You have 10 seconds to produce it." Refik Alba was 42 years old, a Kurd born in Diyarbakir, and he had seen his fill of guns. He stood as if paralyzed. Then he concluded that if this crazy woman came into his garage with a pistol in her hand, there was not going to be much to discuss. "It's on the computer," he said. "Turn it on." He did as she told him. "What's behind that door?" she asked as the computer booted up and the screen began to flicker. "It's just a closet." "Open it." It contained some overalls. "Okay. Go into the closet, stay calm, and I won't have to hurt you." He obeyed her without protest. "Take out your mobile, put it on the floor, and kick it over to me." He did as she said. "Good. Now close the door behind you." It was an antique PC with Windows 95 and a 280 megabytes hard drive. It took an eternity to open the Excel document with the car rental listing. The white Volvo had been rented on 2 occasions. First for 2 weeks in January and then from March 1st. It had not yet been returned. He was paying a weekly fee for a long-term rental. The name was Ronald Niederman. She looked through the folders on the shelf above the computer. One of them had the label identification printed neatly on it. She took the folder down and paged through to Ronald Niederman. When he rented the car in January, he had given his passport as ID, and Refik Alba had made a photocopy. She recognized the blonde hulk at once. According to the passport, he was German, 35 years old, born in Hamburg. The fact that Alba had made a copy from the passport showed that Niederman was just a customer, not a friend. At the bottom of the page, Alba had written a mobile number and a P.O. box address in Göteborg. Salander replaced the folder and turned off the computer. She looked around and found a rubber doorstop next to the front door. She picked it up and went back to the closet and knocked on the door with the barrel of her gun. "Can you hear me in there?" "Yes." "Do you know who I am?" Silence. "He'd have to be blind not to recognize me." "Okay. You know who I am. Are you afraid of me?" "Yes." "Don't be afraid of me, Herr Alba. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm almost finished here. I'm sorry for putting you to this trouble." Okay. Have you got enough air to breathe in there?" "Yes. What do you want, anyway?" "I wanted to see whether a certain woman had hired a car from you 2 years ago," she lied. "I didn't find what I wanted, but it's not your fault. I'll be leaving in a few minutes. I'm going to put the doorstop under the closet door here. The door is thin enough for you to break your way out, but it will take a while. You don't have to call the police. You'll never see me again, and you can open up as usual today and pretend that this never happened." The chances of him not calling the police were pretty remote, but it did not hurt to give him the option to think about. She left the garage and walked to the Toyota Corolla around the corner, where she swiftly changed into Irene Nesser. She was annoyed not to have found a street address for Ronald Niederman in the Stockholm area, just a P.O. box address on the other side of Sweden. But it was the only lead she had. So, to Göteborg. She made for the E20 and turned west towards Arboga. She turned on the radio, but she had just missed the news and got some commercial station. She listened to David Bowie singing, "Putting Out Fire with Gasoline." She didn't know the name of the song, but she took the words as prophetic.
And that marks the end of the current chapter. Thank you for listening to The Book Reader. Stay tuned for the next episode tomorrow. Please subscribe for updates.